who died, who were shot and killed in the back of their head after being tortured. Some of them were shot on the streets, others were thrown into the wells, so they died there in suffering. They were killed in their apartments, houses, blowing up grenades. The civilians were crushed by tanks while sitting in their cars in the middle of the road, just for their pleasure. They cut off limbs, cut their throats, slashed their throats. Women were raped and killed in front of their children. Their tongues were pulled out only because the aggressor did not hear what they wanted to hear from them. So this is no different from other terrorists such as Daesh, who occupied some territories. And here it is done by a member of the United Nations Security Council, destroying internal unity, borders, countries, and taking the right of more than a dozen of countries who are self-determined and independent. They pursue a consistent policy of destroying ethnic and religious diversity. They inflame wars and deliberately lead them in such a way that to kill as many regular civilians and cities, to leave the country where they deploy their troops in ruins and filled with mass graves. You all see that. And they support hatred at the level of the state and seek to export it to other countries through their system of propaganda and political corruption. They provoke a global food crisis that could lead to famine in Africa, Asia, and other countries, and will surely end in large-scale political chaos in many countries, destroying their domestic security. So where is the security that the Security Council needs to guarantee? It's not there, although there is a Security Council. So where is the peace? Where are those guarantees that the United Nations needs to guarantee? It is obvious that the key institution of the world, which must ensure the coercion of any aggressor to peace, simply cannot work effectively. Now the world can see that what Russian military did in Bucha while keeping the city under their occupation, but the world has yet to see what they have done in other occupied cities and regions of our country. Geography might be different or various, but cruelty is the same, crimes are the same, and accountability must be inevitable. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to remind you of Article 1, Chapter 1 of the UN Charter. What is the purpose of our organization? Its purpose is to maintain peace and make sure that peace is adhered to. And now the UN Charter is violated literally, starting with the Article 1. And if so, what is the point of all other articles? Today, as a result of Russia's actions in our country, in Ukraine, the most terrible war crimes of all times we see since the end of World War II, and they are being committed. Russian troops are deliberately destroying Ukrainian cities to ashes with artillery and airstrike. They are deliberately blocking city, creating mass starvation. They deliberately shoot columns of civilians on the road trying to escape from the territory of hostilities. They even deliberately blow up shelters where civilians hide from airstrikes. They are deliberately creating conditions in the temporarily occupied territories so that as many civilians as possible are killed there. The massacre in our city of Bucha is only one, unfortunately, only one of many examples of what the occupiers have been doing on our land for the past 41 days. And there are many more cities, similar places where the world has yet to learn the full truth. Mariupol, Kharkiv, Chernobyl, Tyrka, Borodyanka, and dozens other Ukrainian communities each of them is similar to Bucha. I know, and you know perfectly well, what the representatives of Russia will say in response to the accusations of these crimes. They have said that many times. The most significant was after the shooting down of the Malaysian Boeing over Donbas by Russian forces with Russian weapons, or during the war in Syria. They will blame everyone just to justify their own actions. They will say that there are various versions, different versions, and it is impossible to establish which one of those versions is true. They will even say that the bodies were of those kills were allegedly thrown away, and all videos are staged. But it is 2022 now. We have conclusive evidence, so there are satellite images. We can conduct full and transparent investigation. That is what we are interested in. Maximum access for journalists, maximum cooperation with international institutions, involvement of the International Criminal Court, complete truth and full accountability. I'm sure that every member state of the UN should be interested in this. For what? In order to punish once and for all those who consider themselves privileged and believe that they can get away with anything. So show all the other potential war criminals in the world how they will be punished. If the biggest one is punished, then everyone is punished. Why did Ukraine come to Ukraine? I will tell you, because Russia's leadership feels like colonizers. In ancient times, they need our wealth, our people. Russia has already deported hundreds of thousands of our citizens to their country. They abducted more than 2,000 children, just simply conducted those children and continue to do so. Russia wants to turn Ukraine into silent slaves. The Russian military are looting openly the cities and villages that they have captured. This is wide-scale looting. They are stealing everything, starting with food, ending with earrings, gold earrings that are pulled out and covered with blood. We are dealing with a state that is turning the veto into the UN Security Council into the right to die. This undermines the whole architecture of global security. It allows them to go unpunished. So they are destroying everything that they can. So if this continues, the countries will rely only on the power of their own arms to ensure their security, and not on international law, not rely on international institutions. The United Nations can be simply closed. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to close the UN? Do you think that the time of international law is gone? If your answer is no, then you need to act immediately. The UN Charter must be restored immediately. The UN system must be reformed immediately so that the veto is not the right to die, that there is a fair representation in the Security Council of all regions of the world. The aggressor must be brought to peace immediately. Determination is needed. The massacre from Syria to Somalia, from Afghanistan to Yemen and Libya, that should have been stopped a long time ago, to tell you the truth. If tyranny had at least once received such a response to the war it had waged, it would have ceased to exist, and honest peace had been guaranteed after it, and the world would have changed for sure. And then perhaps there would not be war in my country against our people, against Ukrainian people, against our citizens, but the world watched and did not want to see either the occupation of Crimea or the war against Georgia or taking the entire Transnistria from Moldova, and how Russia was preparing the basis for other conflicts and wars near their borders. How to stop it? right away. The Russian military and those who gave them orders must be brought to justice immediately for war crimes in Ukraine. Anyone who has given criminal orders and carried out them by killing our people will be brought before the tribunal, which should be similar to the Nuremberg tribunals. I would like to remind Russian diplomats that a man like von Ribbentrop has not escaped punishment for crimes in World War II. I would also like to remind you that Adolf Eichmann also did not go unpunished. Nobody of them escaped the punishment. But the main thing is today is it's time to transform the system, the United Nations. So therefore, I propose to convene a global conference, and we can do it here in peaceful Kyiv in order to determine how we are going to reform the world security system, how we will rely, how do we establish guarantee of recognition of borders and integrity of states and countries, how we will assert the rule of international law. It is now clear that the goals set in San Francisco in 1945 for the creation of a global security international organization have not been achieved, and it is impossible to achieve them without reforms. Therefore, we must do everything in our power to pass on to the next generation an effective UN with the ability to respond preventively to security challenges and thus guarantee peace, prevent aggression, and force aggressors to peace, have the determination and ability to punish if the principles of peace are violated. There can be no more exceptions or privileges. Everybody must be equal. All participants of international relations, regardless of economic strength, geographical area, and individual ambitions. The power of peace must become dominant. The power of justice and the security power, as humanity has always dreamed of it. Ukraine is ready to provide a platform for one of the main offices of the newly updated security system, as similar to the Geneva office that deals with human rights, and Nairobi office that deals with environmental protection, and in Kyiv we can have U24 office that can specialize in preventive measures to maintain peace. I would like to remind you of our peaceful mission in Afghanistan. When we, Ukrainians, evacuated from that country more than 1,000 people from at our own expense. It was a very difficult phase, and Ukraine came to their help. We took in people of different nationalities, ethnic groups, different faiths, Afghan citizens of European countries, U.S., Canada. We did not look who needed help. Was it one of our own or somebody else? We helped all of them. We saved everyone. If every time there was a need, everyone in the world would be confident that help would come, the world would be definitely safer. Therefore, Ukraine has the moral right to propose a reform of the world security system. We have proven that we helped others not only happy time, but in dark times too. And now we need decisions from the Security Council for peace in Ukraine. If you do not know how to make this decision, you can do two things: either remove Russia as an aggressor and a source of war, so it cannot block decisions about its own aggression, its own war, and then do everything that we can do to establish peace. Or the other option is, please show how we can reform or change, dissolve yourself and work for peace. Or if there is no alternative and no option, then the next option would be dissolve yourself altogether. And I know that you can admit that if there is nothing that you can do besides conversation, we need peace. Ukraine needs peace, Europe needs peace, and the world needs peace. And finally, I would kindly ask you very much to watch this short video. Please give us one more minute of your time, the video that we want to show that one country can violate rights, and that's the result of being unpunished. If possible, please watch this video, because it is impossible to get everyone to come to our country and see it with your own eyes. Therefore, I would ask you to watch this video. Thank you very much.
He's putting it.
No,
it's a video. He's playing a video. No,
he's about to play it.
Here's the video.
I'm not sure. The video, is it just coming?
Uploaded to the technicians of the Security Council. So they have it in their possession.
We will sort that one out. Technically, we don't have the video. So I propose that while we sort that out, I thank His Excellency Mr. Zelenskyy for his compelling and powerful remarks. We will come back to the video when we've sorted out the technical issues around it. And may I say, speaking in my national capacity, may I express appreciation to the President for his leadership in wartime and for the extraordinary fortitude and bravery of the Ukrainian people under this unprovoked and illegal invasion. I resume my function as the President of the Security Council, and while we sort out the technical video, I propose to give the floor to those Council members who wish to make statements. And I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me also start by thanking UAE and Ambassador Nisbeh for her successful presidency during the month of March. Madam President, as you begin your Security Council presidency, I want to thank the United Kingdom for your leadership and for organizing this vital discussion on Ukraine today. I also want to thank the Secretary General for his remarks and the other briefers. And I'd like to extend a warm welcome to President Zelenskyy. I was so moved by the address he made recently to our Congress, and we are truly honored by his presence here under the circumstances that he and Ukraine face today. Madam President, last night I returned from a trip to Moldova and Romania. I saw with my own eyes the refugee crisis caused by Russia's unconscionable war. I spoke to refugees who indicated to me their desires to return to their home. And we've all seen the images on TV of the bombed out buildings. But what we have not seen is that behind those destroyed buildings are destroyed lives and destroyed families. I met with women and children who had fled Ukraine, who stuffed their lives into backpacks and left the only home they had ever known. And these were sobering conversations. One young woman I spoke to came with her 6-year-old brother who had autism and is struggling with cancer. Their single mother helped them escape to save their lives. But Russia's war has interrupted the care her brother desperately needs. Another woman I spoke to fled with her 8-year-old from Odessa. The father, who they'd left behind, told them there was shelling right next to their apartment that very night. And they very well could have died had they not left. A third woman I met told me that she used to love to travel, but never expected her next trip would be to flee for her life. When I asked her where she was from, she started to say, and then she stopped with tears in her eyes and said, "I'm sorry. I don't know how to say it, whether I live in Kyiv or whether I used to live in Kyiv." She was realizing in the moment just how dramatically her life had changed because of this senseless war. These are 3 stories of more than 10 million people, 6 million internally displaced, 4 million who have left Ukraine altogether, 4 million people who have relied on the big-heartedness of countries like Moldova, Romania, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and others across the region and the world to welcome and support all those leaving Ukraine in search of safety. Ukraine's neighbors are bearing the brunt of Europe's most significant refugee crisis since World War II. And I want these countries to know that they have a committed partner in the United States. And that is why the United States announced recently that we are prepared to provide more than $1 billion in new funding toward humanitarian assistance for those affected by Russia's war in Ukraine and its severe impact around the world. And it is why we are welcoming up to 100,000 Ukrainians and others fleeing Russia's aggression to the United States. We will continue to assist humanitarian efforts to help the people of Ukraine and all those fleeing Putin's violence. But as heart-wrenching as the stories are that I heard in Moldova and Romania, there are some stories we will never get to hear. Those of the people we saw in the images out of Bucha. We've all seen the gruesome photos. Lifeless bodies lying in the streets, apparently summarily executed, their hands tied behind their backs. As we work to independently confirm the events depicted in these images, I would remind this council that based on the currently available information, the United States has assessed that members of Russia's forces have committed war crimes in Ukraine. And even before seeing the images from Bucha, President Zelenskyy, along with others in the region, were reporting that children were being abducted, and we heard him say that today. Also abducted are mayors and doctors, religious leaders, journalists, and all who dare defy Russia's aggression. Some of them, according to credible reports, including by the Mariupol City Council, have been taken to so-called filtration camps, where Russian forces are reportedly making tens of thousands of Ukrainian citizens relocate to Russia. Reports indicate that Russian federal security agents are confiscating passports and IDs, taking away cell phones, and separating families from one another. I do not need to spell out what these so-called filtration camps are reminiscent of. It's chilling, and we cannot look away. Every day, we see more and more how little Russia respects human rights. And that is why I announced yesterday that the United States, in coordination with Ukraine and many other UN member states, will seek Russia's suspension from the UN Human Rights Council. Given the growing mountain of evidence, Russia should not have a position of authority in a body whose very purpose is to promote respect for human rights. Not only is this the height of hypocrisy, it is dangerous. Russia is using its membership on the Human Rights Council as a platform for propaganda to suggest Russia has a legitimate concern for human rights. In fact, we will hear some of that propaganda here today, I know. And I will not dignify these lies with a response, only to say that every lie we hear from the Russian representative is more evidence that they do not belong on the Human Rights Council. 140 UN member states voted to condemn Russia over its unprovoked war and the humanitarian crisis it has unleashed upon the people of Ukraine. Here's my message to all of you. Now is the time to match those words with action and show the world that we can work responsibly. And I share President Zelensky's view that this moment requires responsible world powers and global leaders to show some backbone and stand up to Russia's dangerous and unprovoked threat against Ukraine and the world. The Secretary General said that confronting this threat is the Security Council's charge. It is, and it is also the responsibility of UN leaders and leaders around the world, every single member state with a voice in the GA. No one can be a shield for Russia's aggression. Suspending Russia from the Human Rights Council is something we collectively have the power to do in the General Assembly. Our votes can make a real difference. Russia's participation on the Human Rights Council hurts the Council's credibility. It undermines the entire UN, and it is just plain wrong. Let us come together to do what is right and do right by the Ukrainian people. Let us take this step to help them to start to rebuild their lives. And let us match the courage of President Zelenskyy, who we are so honored to have with us today. President Zelenskyy, I want you to know that we stand with the people of Ukraine as you face down this brutal attack on your sovereignty, on your democracy, and on your freedom. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Albania.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me thank Ambassador Nusibe for having steered our work during the month of March and wish the UK and you, Madam President, full success in our common work during this month. Albania welcomes President...
So we were just listening to the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield. Before that, though, we were listening to Volodymyr Zelenskyy appeal to the Security Council for a full war crimes investigation in Ukraine. This, of course, comes on the heels of incredibly disturbing video that we're seeing out of the town of Bucha. Now that the Russian military has left there, what we have seen left behind are civilians who have clearly been abused, murdered, we'll just say murdered in the street, indicating more and more that what has occurred there are war crimes. In fact, the U.S. ambassador said that's exactly what the U.S. has concluded even before a full investigation has been conducted. And what she was calling for was for Russia to be removed from the Human Rights Council. They're actually on the Human Rights Council. What President Zelenskyy said, and this is what we've sort of seen, Vlad, as he has spoken to various bodies, whether they're governmental bodies around the world or other bodies like NATO. What he has said was, look, this is a violation of your own policy. He pointed out the UN Charter, the first article, which talks about the role of the UN, the reason that it's there is to maintain peace. And he says, look, Russia has already violated that. And if you think Bucha is bad, there are many other cities, Kharkiv, Mariupol, that we have no idea what's been taking place there. So he's calling for a full and transparent investigation, pledging to cooperate with international media as well as others who want to investigate, calling what happened there a war crime.
I think what was also interesting about President Zelensky's speech, Emery, was he very clearly, in very forceful language, pointed out that the entire reason that the United Nations exists is to prevent situations like the one
Article 1
that we are seeing now. And in fact, he turned the tables on the United Nations by saying, if you are unable to do this, then maybe you should rethink this organization in the first place.
Yeah.
He painted a very stark picture of what satellite imagery and our own reporting, Deborah Pata on the ground in Bucha, has confirmed that the Russian military, I'm quoting President Zelensky here now, the Russian military purposefully killed anyone who served in our country, shot and killed women outside houses, killed entire families, adults and children, and tried to burn bodies. He went on to say that they slashed throats. Women were raped and killed in front of their children. Their tongues were put out because the aggressors did not want to hear what they wanted. He even pointed to the fact that the Russian military is behaving like Daesh, which is the French word for ISIS. In other words, painting a very direct line between the actions of Russia's military and the terrorist organization known around the world as ISIS. And so President Zelensky very clearly saying, look, if the Russians are deliberately doing this and are seeking to blame everyone to justify their actions, it's 2022. President Zelensky said, we have the mechanisms in place to establish the truth.
Right.
Why are we dithering?
Right, and he warned that Russia would deny, and we've already heard from Russia earlier, and you know, Russia has said that the scenes from around Ukraine are fake, that they are staged. But now we have satellite images that show that the bodies that are in Bucha now were there several weeks ago when the Russian military was in charge of the city as well.
I find it also interesting that he also implored the United Nations to create a tribunal, and he said very specifically similar to the tribunal that the Allies created in the wake of World War II, the Nuremberg Tribunal. President Zelensky, called for a tribunal similar to Nuremberg to be established because of these war crimes, which, as you said, the ambassador to the United Nations, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, also indicated these were war crimes. And President Zelensky said every Russian who gave orders and executed them in Ukraine must be brought to justice.
So, you know, we will see what will happen moving forward. The U.S. ambassador to the UN said that Russia should be kicked off of the Human Rights Council. But there are other things that the United Nations can do. And you know what I was thinking, Vlad, and this is maybe for a broader conversation. You worked in Africa. Today also is the beginning of a war crimes trial for crimes that occurred in Darfur.
Right.
20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, hundreds of thousands of people were killed. One individual is on trial.
Yes.
And I think there might be a broader discussion about how do you determine who's accountable?
Right.
And you know, and whether or not a war crimes trial, whether or not the process is good enough.
Right. It's a very, very long process. In fact, I was in Sierra Leone when Charles Taylor, who's the Liberian warlord, who you recall during the civil war in Liberia was responsible for child soldiers, the blood diamonds, all of that business. I was in Sierra Leone to cover his trial and sentencing. That was in 2012 or 2013, in my memory, if memory serves. And that was many, many years after that war had long ended. And so a situation like this is not going to be around the corner. They're not going to do this anytime soon.
Yeah.
But what President Zelensky is calling for is immediate action. He essentially was saying that, you know, you're seeing this with your very eyes. And in 2022, we perhaps don't have to behave the way we did in the 1990s. We have mechanisms in place either because of the satellite imagery or the reporting that's being done on the ground in real time.
Yeah.
We're getting the reports on the ground in real time from our correspondents and others. And so what is the UN there for, if not to the UN, remember what it was created for in the wake of World War II in 1947 to prevent atrocities just like this and world wars from breaking out. President Zelensky is saying sort of live up to the mandate in which you established this august body.
This would be a good conversation to have with Pamela Falk.
She's going to join at the noon hour, right?
She is CBS News foreign affairs analyst. She is basically at the UN pretty much every single day, and she's going to join the noon hour show to talk a little bit more about that.
All right, so while we await for Pamela to join us, let's take a quick break. We'll be back on the other side of that break with a whole lot more news. Stick around.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Some Republicans are now accusing companies like Twitter and Facebook of targeting conservatives.
They've had unchecked power to censor.
I do not have access to my main Facebook account.
I was